Rain whispered against the windshield as a tired driver accepted one last request for the night. Sleepy Pines Motel. The gospel hymn drifting from his old AM radio flickered through static, weary but familiar, the kind of song that sounded tired from being faithful too long. He pulled into the motel lot, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. Sleepy Pines Motel. The red glow bleeding across the pavement like a warning. A lone figure stood beneath it, hood pulled low, soaked through. The man climbed into the back seat without a word. The driver tried to lighten the mood. Nights like this could feel endless. He talked about working nights to support his 3 kids, how his wife teased that if he didn't bring home a paycheck every morning, she'd think he was out cheating. How his youngest joked he lived in the car more than the house. But the hooded passenger didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't even look up. When the driver spoke again, the man finally cut him off, voice sharp and cold. He didn't want conversation. He didn't want connection. He wanted silence. The driver apologized, lowered the radio, and let the rain fill the spaces between them. A few miles down the road, the man finally spoke. It wasn't small talk. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't even human in its lack of empathy. He said, "People wasted their lives begging for help, begging for luck, begging for a break. Not him. He took what he wanted. He collected what he believed the world owed him. Every slight, every insult, every closed door. He said no one ever gave him anything, so he decided long ago he would simply take everything." The driver kept his eyes on the road, listening. He suggested, gently, that maybe the man had already taken enough. But the hooded passenger only laughed, a laugh with no warmth, no joy, no soul. There was no such thing as enough. He drove through life without stopping for anyone, and no one was going to stop him tonight. The rain slowed as the town thinned out. The forest rose like walls on both sides of the road. Suddenly the GPS glitched. The route flickered. The fare jumped to $666. Before the driver could comment, the gospel station warped, stretching like a drowning voice. "And the wages of sin is..." A burst of harsh static swallowed the last word. Silence followed, heavy, wrong. The passenger finally lifted his head, unimpressed by the strange broadcast. He told the driver to keep going, then leaned forward and quietly revealed something metallic beneath his jacket. Not pointed, not waved around, just present. He told the driver to turn left at the last house on the left, a lonely structure leaning at the edge of the woods, its porch light barely cutting through the fog. Past that house was a narrow gravel road, disappearing into blackness. The driver obeyed. Headlights swept into the forest, catching wet branches and drifting waves of fog. The engine groaned as the tires crunched over gravel and loose rock. Every bump rattled through the chassis like a heartbeat. Fog drifted low across the ground, thick as breath. At first, the trees formed a tight corridor, their trunks pale and slick with rain. But the deeper they traveled, the more those trees seemed to fade, swallowed by a darkness that felt less like night and more like a void. The passenger asked what the driver meant earlier, about looking in the wrong place. The driver's voice was low and steady as he replied. He told the man that he had been paying his fare for years. Before the passenger could respond, the back door of the car flung open on its own. A rush of freezing air blasted inside. Then came the fog, thick, crimson, alive, pouring into the car as if it had been waiting. Beyond the swirling red mist, a towering Torii gate emerged, glowing faintly in the black void. Behind it, endless rows of smaller gates stretched away into nothingness, forming a corridor that felt ancient and unforgiving. The passenger stumbled back, horrified, demanding to know what he was seeing. But the fog answered first. Shadows moved within it, tendrils of smoke that twisted like living things. They reached for him, curling around his arms and pulling with deliberate strength. He fought, cursed, and begged as the shadows tightened. His voice rose into panic, but the fog swallowed every sound. The driver remained still, and while the man begged to be let go, the driver spoke as if delivering news he had spoken many, many times. "For what it's worth," he said, "I hate working nights." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added with a dry, weary humor, "Guess I'll need 5 stars for this one." The tendrils tightened. In a final, violent pull, the fog yanked the passenger backward, dragging him into the red-lit void beyond the gates. The light pulsed once, bright, sharp, and then collapsed into darkness. Silence poured into the space left behind. The fog thinned slowly, retreating like a tide dragged back into the trees. The red glow faded from the air, swallowed by the returning gray of early morning. The car sat motionless in the middle of the narrow forest road, its taillights glowing faintly through the last wisps of mist. The driver didn't move right away. He simply watched the place where the fog had swallowed the man, as though waiting to be sure it was over. Then, with the same calm he'd carried the entire night, he reached forward and adjusted the radio knob. The gospel hymn returned instantly, clear, warm, and steady now, as if the static had never touched it. The familiar melody filled the cabin, soft and unwavering. Something about it felt grounding, the sound of a world righting itself. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn crept in through the branches above, painting thin gold lines across the wet pavement. Birds began to stir, their quiet calls echoing through the trees. The forest, moments ago a gateway to something ancient and merciless, now looked like any other sleepy morning in the middle of nowhere. The driver exhaled once, a long breath he seemed to have been holding since the moment the man climbed into the car. The tense weight that had filled the air was gone, replaced by something still and strangely peaceful. He tapped the rideshare screen on the dashboard. The meter displayed $0. No fare, no record of the ride at all, as though the passenger had never existed. A small notification blinked at the bottom of the screen. New request available. The driver looked toward the empty road ahead. There was no sign of the fog or the gate now, only a pale ribbon of asphalt stretching through the forest, glistening with rain. He shifted the car into drive, letting the tires roll forward with quiet ease. The hymn rose a little louder, filling the car with its steady rhythm. It felt almost comforting, like an old friend returning to walk beside him. The driver spoke softly, almost to himself, but the words carried with a strange, solemn certainty. Next passenger. And with that, He followed the road as it opened into the slow, waking light of morning, ready to greet whoever, or whatever, waited for him next. You've seen enough to know how this ends. Subscribe to Theater 916 Horror. We'll see you soon.